Welcome to the May 25th, 2022 Finance Subcommittee of the Brookline School Committee. We'll get started on the agenda. We have a first item is approval of the April 6th, 2022 meeting minutes. I'm going to make a motion of favorable action. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thanks, David. Andy?
I should abstain because I wasn't here for that entire meeting and wasn't on the subcommittee then.
Very good. David?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Next item is acceptance of grants and gifts. There's, I'm going to start with the grants. There's grants from Sodexo for $250 and from the State Department of Education for another about $11,620. Sam, I don't see Donna here. Is there anything you want to tell us about either one of the grants?
I can speak to, hold on, Michelle. I can speak to the one for 250 was through Sodexo, and that was to help the food pantry. It was a project with kids. And then the other one is, if I recall, I don't have it right, is
I think it's for after school and out of school time. It's at ASOST.
okay, and that's, I think that's something that has been an annual event, and it's just continuing from the same funding source.
Okay, so it's got the this is for steps to success, basically.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Does anyone want to move favorable action on the grants?
Second.
No, you got to move it. I'm counting you as moving it. Andy, you're going to second
A
it?
second, yeah.
Okay. Andy, how do you vote?
Yes.
David?
Second. Sorry, someone's calling me at the same time.
I'm going to count that as a yes, and I'll vote yes as well. And now we're going to go to the gifts. Let me pull those up. So there's $5,000 for BEEP from an anonymous donor, which is for enrichment expenses, enrichment experiences, I'm sorry. And then there's about $225 or $325 for the donations for the junior semi, which helps offset the expenses for people who can't afford tickets, to help offset those. So those are really very nice things that the community is providing, and thank you. I'm going to make a motion to accept. Andy, will you second?
I will.
Okay, David, how do you vote?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is the FY22 budget update. Sam, anything notable you want to let us know about for FY22?
Yes, well, I have Michelle McGlone on the phone with me, and so I'm putting her into this meeting on the phone, and she likes surprises. So say hi, Michelle. Anyway.
Hey, how's everybody doing?
All right.
Good.
So I have just from her, the good news is I have a projection which I can share my screen in a minute, but if that might make sense, and then we're going to walk through it, and I'm going to ask your indulgence because it's sort of a work in progress, all right? But it's worth doing. Okay, so share. You guys see this thing?
Yes.
Good. So on the top, and Michelle's going to help me. Okay, so this is fresh out of the oven. All right, so the revenues, as of right this minute, we are projecting, and this is better than we thought we would be a little bit, is 633, we'll call it 634,000 in revenue. In expenses, we have $591,400. So if you take those two numbers, and for now I'm going to say forget the stuff in other, because it's either part of it isn't part of this calculus according to Michelle. It was just some supplementary information that just proceeded to confuse me and with you. So disregard that for now. And so our gross profit is approximately $42,500, 634 minus 591.5, round numbers. Again, the two moving, and so that, and you see the bottom, it's 42,542. That's where we're at, projected. That doesn't include any charge for facility. And we're going to charge half the custodian, that's roughly 30,000, that's half at the Baldwin, half at the Lynch, and overtime related to base events in our buildings for the custodial overtime. And when you add those two together, we're estimating 50,000. And so when you fully load that, our deficit is projected to be $7,500, that bottom number.
What was the beginning year balance on the base revolver? Was it
Uh,
zeroed out or was there a balance?
There was a balance equal to what the liability was for prepaid tuitions.
Okay,
So
so it's
effectively
essentially a
zero.
zero balance. Okay.
That is correct. So I'm actually quite pleased because again, we had started the year thinking it might be 200,000 problem, and that's what it was last year, by the way. And then we thought, well, we think it might be 100,000, and here we are near the break even. And I want to personally thank Michelle for her hard work because she put in hard work. And I think this is largely driven by the top number, because I think we were looking at that top number to be about 500, 550, and it's 6.4. It's over that. It's 634. And I'm projecting, just to remind you all, we're hoping for 750 next year. And I have a pretty high confidence in Michelle and the team and my helping that we're going to get there. You want to say anything?
I wanted to second what you said about Michelle and say thank you to her. I hope she can hear.
Can you hear that, Michelle?
I can hear a little bit, yeah.
She said thank you. Mariah did.
Yeah, it
sure.
is. It is hard work.
Thanks for your support.
Yeah, I mean, other than that, there are no other issues for F-22. All the revolvers are on track, certainly not to finish in deficit in any way. And the operating budget is on track from where we were in the third quarter. Nothing has shown. What I will tell you is, given that we've settled A and B with BEU, and those retros are going to hit June 9th, and I hope to settle custodians tomorrow, and assuming we do, then at least the uncertainty of retro pay will be current and not have to worry about accruing for unsettled contracts, and be able to come in a lot tighter with respect to closing the year.
I'm going to ask two questions and then I'm going to call on Helen. My
Okay.
first question is, last year, was it I can't remember when we voted to waive the assessment on base, the space assessment. And was that, I can't remember now, was that retroactive or was that for the current year? And is this assessment, have we already voted to waive this assessment, or is this the next time around we have to?
I don't know. I don't have a good answer. Helen has
Okay.
got her hand raised.
Helen, do you remember if like the assessment we waived is the one that's relating to this, or if it was the previous one?
I think it was the what did we do with extended day? Because we did the same thing with extended day as we've done with base. That I remember. We definitely, in the COVID year when they couldn't run anything, we suspended it.
We had a different thing, I thought, for base last year as we did for extended days.
You mean not this fiscal year, the fiscal year before?
2 years ago, you voted to waive all assessments for extended days. And then
What year, school year?
that was the COVID year 0.5 for the previous year, I believe. And so for the year which was half COVID, I believe the next year, which they would have had to pay, but they weren't running programs.
I think they paid that year when COVID started in March, because they had done 2/3 of the year. It was the following year that we said nobody would pay, not extended day, not base.
Sounds
So
great.
that would have been 2021 fiscal
Then we
year.
had, I think we voted one just last summer. We voted two things. One was to change the tuition payments. We had increased the tuition payment for the music program, music lessons. And then I thought we also voted to waive the room assessment for base. I'm just, maybe
Yes, that's what
Sam,
I
you can
thought
just,
too.
yeah,
That
okay.
was
So
my recollection.
Sam, can you look back on that and just
I will.
confirm? Okay, because that's,
I
I think,
will.
an important thing. And then,
And I actually, if I could, Mariah, because
Yeah.
we're on this, I think it's a good idea for this year. Let's give them a little breathing room so that next year they'll be able to pay the room assessments starting in September.
I guess
That would be
that
my-
was my second question was, Sam, do you feel that we should assess all or some of this assessment, or should we waive it?
Well, I guess my feeling, and I've talked to Michelle about this. I mean, I think what was assessed before, I think it was well into the, it was a lot. It was near 200 grand.
Yes, it was.
And that's not fair. You know, and I've told Michelle, I'll tell you, that's not fair. I think when base was living high, a lot of stuff was sort of thrown in there. Base isn't living high. And so I think this is fair. I don't think they should pay zero. I think they should pay the actual incremental cost related to the space they live in. And next year it'll get better. They have neighbors, they have roommates, and so they won't pay the whole thing next year for Baldwin. And I'm just charging them half the custodian. We're not charging utility or anything. And for the unique spaces that require unique overtime for programs they run. And that's it. Not paying full-time people just to cover full-time people.
So I'm going to make a motion for the finance committee, not to cut this conversation off too much, but I'm hoping we can end by 5:30 because I've got somewhere else to be. That essentially we would, the motion I would make is that the assessment would be charged at the $42,542 amount.
To zero them out.
To zero them out, but not to certainly put them in deficit.
That's fair. I'll whatever they have up to what the actual incremental cost is,
Right.
but
Exactly.
not to put them in the zero. I agree.
Exactly. Is there a second from the committee?
I'll
Second.
that. Yeah.
Okay. David,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. Helen, I presume your hand is an old hand and that wasn't. a
No,
hand
it
to put down.
isn't. It
Oh,
isn't.
oh, sorry. Go
It's
ahead.
okay. I just had two comments. One, I worry about a nonprofit not having any operating capital. You know, usually they're supposed to have 3 months worth. And if
I
I read this,
agree. I agree with you, Helen.
And if I read this correctly, I couldn't see it real well, but if I read it correctly, they're going to have zero. And that's just not a good idea.
They're not
especially-
having zero. They're carrying forward tuition. They have, how much if
Then
you
I didn't
scroll up?
see.
Scroll that up.
93,000, but in theory, I agree wholeheartedly with Helen. And my goal is if we can allow, when I close the books, I would like to allow for some, we'll call it, allow for some, some working capital.
Yeah.
Start the year. It isn't lost on me.
Okay. All right. And my second, if I could,
Go for
one
it.
other quick question. The athletic revolving fund.
Yeah.
You said all the funds are, I didn't get exactly what you
Are positive, are
are
projected. to
positive. The
finish
athletic one
positive.
also, because that one historically has never been positive.
It's tracking that way so far.
Okay.
And I keep
Maybe
an eye
Mary
on
Ellen
it.
moved enough of the things out of that fund so that it's now,
Well, we can talk about in a later meeting. But my goal is to allow for revolving funds, and I think we touched on this with the third quarter projection, to have some, again, working capital and some. So I'm looking to, for athletics, for base, for beep, for school lunch, for use of school property, the big ones, for materials fee, to have sufficient ending balances to allow them to operate into the beginning of the year.
Mhm.
That is part of my plan for year-end closeout.
Great. Thank you.
Before I call in Andy, we don't have a July meeting scheduled yet, but I'm gonna just put a pin in. I would like to come back to this conversation once the fiscal year is closed, just so we know what we ended up doing. Is that okay, Sam?
Yes.
Okay, let me just make a note. Andy, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just a general question about the outlook for the future. Like, it seems like there's a very strong relationship between how much stuff can be in person versus remote, and how popular these programs are and how much tuition gets taken in. Like, what's the situation now? Like, is there room to grow in terms of moving more things back to in person and thereby attracting more
I would
Can
defer
I-
to,
people?
we had a presentation on this a couple months ago, Andy, and I'd love to be able to maybe send it to you so that
Okay.
because I thought Michelle with Sam's support did a really nice job of articulating the vision forward.
Mhm.
And so I think that's probably, rather than rehashing it now, let's share that with you. I think that
Okay.
was in March, maybe. I can
Great.
go back and
right,
find
that
out.
sounds right to me. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm new on this subcommittee, so I won't have heard all the
Exactly,
background.
right. Yeah, it was the February 23rd meeting. Okay. Anything else, Sam, you want to talk about FY22 before we move on to FY23?
I guess that would be a no. Everything else is on track.
Okay. Thanks again to Michelle for all the hard work and all
Thank
the
you,
thinking she's
Michelle.
been
Enjoy the
doing.
rest of your day.
Oh, thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
Stop
Okay,
sharing.
FY23.
Now here I don't have a handout per se, but I met with Donna's. I mean, I did. Oh, Donna's in. Great. And I met with Linus, and basically the areas for 23, we're pretty much tied down with having a budget that we're going to load in, assuming we get it voted tonight. I have our consultant, Ruth Quinn, that is helping to do a few things. One is to I'll frame it this way, have Munis work for us instead of us working for Munis. And so she's working on the chart of accounts, especially in the expense categories, to have it better represent the, where we're spending the money to go right into the end of year report. And so just to give you an idea of where my priorities lie, she's working on the chart as we speak. As soon as, and Donna is working on the distribution as I look at her, and what the plan is, and Linus is working on the staffing as I see his name on the screen. And this is all going to culminate by the end of next week, June the 3rd, where we're going to load this into Munis as granular as we can get. Now that's half the loaf. The other half the loaf is training departments and having payroll charge people to the right place where the budget is in the first place. So we can track this stuff and make sure that we're not buried with a bunch of, I'll call it journal entries. They call it something else here, reallocations. But it's moving salary around or non-salary around. That's going to be, it's going to take some education, especially on the non-salary stuff, but I'm going to do it. We're going to set up templates. People are going to do the work. We're going to meet with curriculum coordinators, all of it. The next thing we're going to do as a priority for 23 is we're going to streamline and make more user-friendly our job classes and job codes in Munis, and to have position control clean. That we can actually use it in a way that helps us track the budget, because as we all know, out of our $121 million appropriation this year, 105 of it is personnel and 16 of it isn't. And so it's 87% of our dollars are in personnel. And if we don't have a good handle on it, it's over. and I don't want it to be over. I like working here. Okay, so we have a plan, and those are the most important things, and that will eventually, and we'll get into future years on the agenda, but those are my top priorities that I've laid out. I even have my Ruth script here, and then using, we want Munis feeds OpenGov. And so again, we want OpenGov working for us, not us working for OpenGov. And so if we can get Munis tight, then OpenGov's going to be tight, because OpenGov, the value I see in OpenGov is that if any residents wants to see, where do we spend in this account for what? OpenGov is great, but it's as good or as bad as we have good budgets and that we're putting the expenses in the right places.
Right.
And so that's where I'm at.
That's great.
And to continue to have clean end of year reports and take that in-house. Ruth is going to work with, I'm probably going to put Kiana on point, as this is going to be a special program for her. And, Donna and all of us are going to support that effort as well as the town. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but those are my priorities for fiscal 23.
I just want to say, Sam, it would be great if in Linus's next update, if you list those priorities. And I think that for people who've been dangling around PSB finances for a while, like Helen and Cliff, at least I'm looking to see the saga of the chart of accounts is like, how many years have we heard about the chart of accounts? And
I was gonna not bring it up. I mean, I thought, okay, I'll talk to Sam.
This is like literally the Odyssey is 20 years of charts of accounts. So to be able to hopefully, it's exciting. It's exciting to think we might be able to turn a corner on the saga of the chart of accounts.
I think so. I mean, I've heard, and I don't want to talk about my predecessor and and honestly, anyway, that's not productive, but I don't think I need a whole year off to focus on this. I think with a consultant, with the right direction, I'm very good. Like the end of year report, we got a clean audit. We got a clean audit because, it was great. I know how to plan. I know how to put a plan together, but then I got the benefit of Ruth and Donna and Justin Casanova Davis, and and we all everybody bought in.
And when did you get it by?
Plan.
And when did you get the clean audit by?
I got the report last week or the week
I'm gonna present it during my finance thing. We can talk about it actually today. Sam, do you still have a copy around there?
I have a copy. Yeah, I have many copies. I can.
Yeah. So I just want to say that when Sam showed it to me last week, it's the most physically unimpressive report because there's nothing to report. So it's like it literally has like a cover page and then like one interior page and then like a front and back cover, and that's it. And that's great. Yeah. So how sometimes people like to have those reports that you put it on the table and it makes a loud noise. This is not a loud noise report, and that's a good thing.
I'm so pleased. I mean, this is only the second, I did this once in Dedham to get to a clean. This is the only other time, and I've been and I guess as I understand it from Bernard Green, this is the first time in the history of Brookline there ever was such a clean report in the end of the year. And I'm proud. I'm proud of my team. And again, I'm good at drawing up game plans. And I think I've got a good one for the chart and this other stuff. And I'm confident in my team to execute along with me to get there.
Thanks, Sam. That's great. So the other thing, just so people know, is last night town meeting started and we would have thought that the budget would have been voted, but they made it halfway through the budget and they did not vote the budget. They, now I can't remember the word. They voted to not adjourned. Thank you. They adjourned partway through the budget warrant article. And so Linus did not present last night. He hopefully will, if they get to schools tonight, he'll present tonight. But it will be helpful to have we don't anticipate any problems, but the budget warrant article has not been voted yet. So that is why it's not voted yet. Anyway, And anything else we want to talk about for FY23 before we move on to sort of timeline for future year planning?
Not that I can see right now. No, not that I can see right now.
Okay. Helen, I see your hands up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you know this right now, but I'd be curious, maybe in the next meeting, how much you think you may be able to hold over till next year from the ARPA funds.
Over and above the million that I budgeted,
Yeah,
I think the number will be north of zero. But again, I'm looking for, I don't want to speculate. I will say this, because we have a structural deficit currently built, and it was mentioned at town meeting last night.
right.
Not lie. And I've mentioned it at school committee. We have a $3 million on our structural deficit and $1 million in ESSER, total of $4 million. My goal is to cut that in half.
Good.
It's not easy, but that's my goal.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean, just carrying an extra 2 million doesn't, that doesn't solve the long-term structural problem. That allows us to buy stuff one time. So what I think needs, Linus can speak more to it. The goal is I'm going to do some of that money. If I had to do one of these and put my finger in the air, I think school lunch is an area that I can tighten up and allow for some structural savings of maybe $500,000. I could maybe, try to base maybe some as that gets better. There are a couple areas that I could look to maybe get half of that. And the other half would be looking at vacant positions that we have and seeing if we really need them. And if we don't need them, that are budgeted, then that's structural savings too. I think those are that's a preview of what we're trying to do to get our deficit down to carry into 24.
And you've also included already the retiring teachers and
That's pulled back $500,000, which I'm hoping we get $500,000.
The other thing, so moving from FY23 to future years, as Sam mentioned, both Dennis Dowdy, who's the chair of advisory, in his budget message, and Heather Hamilton, who's the chair of the select board, in her budget message, talked about the structural deficits on both the school side and the town side. Both mentioned, that there's likely to be an override. Heather went so far as to talk about when she would hold the override. She mentioned doing it in the spring because she would like to have the information on fair share amendment, which is supposed to be taken to the voters in November. And so she would like to have that information on whether or not fair share passes, and if it does, what the impact is on local budgets before bringing an override forward. So that was all discussed last night at the beginning of the budget warrant article, which was not concluded. Just to provide a little bit of context to the next part of our conversation about future year budgets. And I asked Sam and Linus if they could put together sort of a timeline for us of the budget development over the next year so that we can map that against any sort of any override, just so that we're sort of looking ahead at the sort of key touch points of budget planning and syncing that up with any override. Andy, I see your hands up, and then I want to let Sam, you have something to present, right? Something to show?
You're going to help me, but yes, when I
Okay.
tell you how you're going to help me, and we'll walk through it.
Okay, Andy, go ahead, and then we'll go to Sam.
Yeah, before we go on to timeline, I just want to mention, you said, Mariah, that Heather said spring for an override. I think she was even more specific and said May, which is quite late from our point of view, I would think, because it really prolongs the uncertainty into the month when, when things are already set in stone almost, and irrevocable decisions have already been made, some of them. So that's something that we need to keep in mind and maybe have a dialogue with her about the implications of waiting all the way until May.
I think historically, like they hold the overrides with the town election in May. I hear what you're saying, and I'm not sure that there's a lot of, I don't know to what extent there'll be adaptive or willingness to flex on that,
Yeah.
but I agree. Okay, with that, you're right. I think she was specific about May. But anyway, the discussions we had about, when in the year and could we schedule it along with Pierce in the fall, it's for many reasons, including that sort of her position. I think that it's unlikely to happen. Okay, go ahead, Sam. I'm ready to be your assistant as you.
Well, you do in this way because I spoke with Linus, and honestly, the best way to get at this is to take the calendar that you did, the last version, and that's going to be a pretty good guidepost. And I want to walk through it and tell you where the tweaks may be with respect to that. So if you can, I know you
Which
have
calendar are we talking about?
F23 budget calendar.
The one that's like the table in that Google
That
Doc?
is correct.
Okay. Okay. This is going to be messy. Now I'm puzzled what we're going to be doing here. Okay.
Well, you're asking for timeline, and I think
Yeah.
this really lays it out. So stop, let's go to the beginning.
Okay.
So remember, stop there. All right,
Yep.
thank you. So remember, Sam Rippon started August 23rd of 2001. So I was behind the 8 ball because the CIP was due September 17th, 2021. And I'm sorry I don't mean to be crass, but I was screwed. All right, so now that I'm here, we're going to start this a hell of a lot early so that we have a chance on the operating for the override. So literally after we say bye-bye to the students, even at Driscoll, well, even on 24th, literally that last week in June is when I need to start working on CIP. And I know you did a lot of good work, Mariah, yesterday in setting up a table and working with Melissa, because the concerns are like, it's disjointed at best. And so, but, through July, and you're right, Mariah, by early August, we need to have or mid-August, at the latest, late August, we need to have a school committee vote to approve what's going to go in the portal for CIP. And then the minute that happens, we need to pivot, like in mid-August, when we start to have department head, we had a meeting that I did get to go to. I think it was even still before my official start date, where we met at BU with 70 or so, they call budget managers, which are principals, curriculum coordinators, program managers, all of it. And we need to begin to set parameters on what are your needs, with assumptions on, we know what we're going to pay people. We have, assuming you have all the people you have in the base budget with a $2 million structural deficit rolling over, not a 4, then, those meetings are going to happen. It's going to, kick it off. I like literally, right after CIP kickoff meeting in that same time frame on the right there, where it says August 16th, in that same time frame is going to be an operating budget kickoff meeting with the budget managers. At the same time, to say with the same people, we're going to move them forward, hold everything else flat and see how big that number gets. And then the other thing to add to it is Linus is working on his strategic plan. And, and again, Linus and I spoke today about this, and he's going to cost out. Well, he'll tell me what he needs and I'll put price associated with it. And that's going to be a driver. And then that gets us through, the fall. By mid-November is when I freeze the roster, carry all open positions that are budgeted, and move them forward on step and scale. And then add the initiatives and see how big that number is, what I call a top line number. At the same time, by that time, I should have from Melissa Goff what the town school partnership is estimated to provide for year-over-year allocation for F24, 25, 26. And I have all the A and B salaries, and I'll make assumptions everywhere else, but that's where most of the dollars are.
Can I ask a question, interrupt you real quick?
Sure.
So I just want to, I'm going to say this. In November, I'm hearing you say that Linus will have enough of Linus and the school committee, that there will be enough of the strategic plan articulated that we will be able to estimate costs.
I can't say that. Linus could say that. I
Well,
can
I'm
tell
asking
you.
him too. He's here,
Okay.
right?
Yes, he is.
So with the launch of the strategic plan will actually start in September. And I'll have to look back at the projected timeline. I don't know that it will take that much shape by November. I know by the time we get around to the spring semester, we'll have a more solid look, but I wouldn't be overly optimistic. I think we'll be able to have some nuggets of some groupings, but in terms of the specificity, I think that's going to come a little bit later.
And I guess my only comment, and I don't want to position Linus, but I also don't want an override to fail. And so I guess hearing what I just heard, maybe by February, because you need time for an override campaign, and that's when you vote the budget anyways, February, is it's shaped enough that we can give a pretty good target in the cost and pretty good idea of what it's going to buy. And then we draw a delta, a variance, and that's our ask. Linus and I agree that our ask shouldn't be much more than twice what the town is going to ask for. Otherwise, it's not going to look good with the optics. So
Can I interrupt you again? So I just want to confirm, are we saying now that we're going to have the final dollar amounts by the February 15th deadline?
I would say yes.
And we'll have initial amounts for the November long-term forecast submission to the town.
I would say by end of calendar year, because that's when it's going to take a little bit of time. I freeze the staff on November 15th.
I don't think you get the luxury of end of calendar year. Doesn't she require the 5-year forecast like early December?
I mean, I can, yeah, but I'll be tightening it up. I'll give very global numbers, but then I'm going to put a caveat that I got to get granular.
Yeah.
We didn't get granular on the last time. We made global assumptions.
Yeah. Okay.
So Mariah,
Go
could I
ahead,
just
Helen. Yeah.
insert one piece? Usually, I would say almost always, the number that we get in November is not the same numbers we end up with in April. And
The number we get for revenues or the number we're
Yes.
putting forward for budget?
revenues,
Yes. Yep.
revenues.
Low.
And I think just be careful about the assumption of what you get then. It's a moving target and it always has been. Cliff is on here. I would say it always goes up by, well, I don't know. I don't want to say how much. We could
Well,
look back and see.
Well, this year alone, it went up by over 1 million, I believe.
Right. I was going to say 1 million, but I didn't want to
Yeah,
put
I think
my
it was
foot
like
out there.
1.3 million this year or
Yeah,
something.
sounds
Right.
about
And,
right.
and it's been the case in previous years too. So it's not just that this was an outlier. And I also, just my own edification, I think we're going to have more revenues this year that will also help.
Well, I guess I need to, and I'm not, believe me, I'm not trying to tell you all on committee what to do, but I think somebody's got to push the town side hard to give us more solid numbers, because
They never do. We've tried.
but with an override, it's just gonna, if you don't, then you're gonna, if you go too high, you run a risk if you're going unnecessarily too high,
Right.
because I'm just telling you.
The
I
other
get it.
thing that Heather announced last night is that she is planning on, rather than holding a parallel override study committee, she is going to use the town school partnership as I'm not going to say the equivalent of the override study committee, but to do a lot of that work. And I think that your point, Helen, of in an override year, we really need to have a very good sense of what the projected revenues are so that the override is scoped appropriately as well. So I think I expect that will be a natural consequence of the work that's going to have to be done to to frame an override at the right level, if that helps. Okay, so are there any sort of key milestones that beyond the November and the February date as we're sort of planning this from your
Not at this-
perspective, Sam? Okay.
Not at this point, and I'll fill it in, but I mean, it's a work. The good news is we're gonna get an earlier start,
Yeah,
and that's not insignificant, Mariah.
agreed. Yep, no, I agree with that. Any other comments that people want to make on future year override before we go to the finance policy doc? Or on future year budgets in general? Cliff, Catherine, as our AC colleagues, if you want to say anything. I should always call on you, but I'm calling on you now.
I'm gonna say my comments for now. I appreciate this update. I actually have several questions, but Mariah, perhaps it's maybe you and I can chat about some of these offline, and next 14 minutes, I think we should focus on what your agenda is.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, if there's no other comments or anything, I'm going to take us over to the finance policy document. I sent you all a clean copy of that document, but I'm going to show you, I'm going to pull up on the screen the non-clean version of it. I just didn't want to overwhelm you by showing you a crazy, messy document. If I can get this to come up. Whenever
Was
someone,
there a previous finance policy?
there is a preview, it's on the website, and the exciting thing is that it's about to have its 40th anniversary for the most part, so it was long overdue for a refresh, vast quantities of it. Let me pull it up real quick just so that people can see that.
40
Just-
years ago.
Yeah. So let
You
me.
didn't go back to it, huh?
Not much has changed in 40 years, huh?
Let me pull it up real quick just so people can see. It's on the website under the school committee section policies, and you can see that this one, this first one is voted in 1982. The second bit was voted in 82.
I think there was
82.
something that was changed.
There's definitely, you'll see there's other sections, but for the most part, this one was voted 92. This one was
Yeah.
voted 82. So it's time. It's time. So this was something that had actually been discussed last year, and then with everything we didn't get the chance to, but MASC put out in January a revised sort of their recommended financial policy. And what I did was I took theirs as sort of the default and then looked at ours, and where I thought that there were things we'd added that I thought were important or whatever, I sort of dropped them back over into the MASC draft and made some other adjustments based on how we work or how I thought might be nice for us to work. So I'm going to show you the this, and you'll see, I'm going to give you sort of the just the gestalt of it right now, so you can see that there were a lot of changes made to it. So there's this, I'll just show you, there's 17 policies in here that make up the whole policy subsection of the policy manual, the finance section of the policy manual. So there's this one on financial management, and you can see some of the edits I put in there. Revenue sources, and I reallocated or rearranged some of that stuff. I had a couple of areas that have comments on them, still things to sort out. Let me see, what are some other things in here? Brookline has a whole thing on scholarships that we award. And so there was an existing policy from about 10 years ago on sort of the protocols about accepting funds for those and then distributing funds for those. And so I left that all in, or I added that now into this so that we would retain that policy on the scholarships. Cash
That's
handling.
really
Wow,
good to
was
keep
that-
that.
Sorry, Linus, did you say something too?
I was asking where did that get pulled from? The
It's from
scholar-
our existing policy, it's our
From the
existing policy
existing,
manual.
okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I went, so basically what I did was I went through our existing policy manual, and anything I thought was important
Yeah,
to bring
I'm with-
over, I brought over.
Okay,
And a lot of it, like honestly, a lot of the 80s policy was, there wasn't like huge secrets, although there's different things, there's new regulations from the state and so forth that have been implemented in the past 40 years. and the MASC language was generally cleaner and tighter than what we had from 40 years ago. So, but again, where there was content that I thought was appropriate and unique to our district, I pulled it into the document. There's a section on cash and funds handling. The other thing I should say is for some of these, it's not perfect like I did. Some of these, I think like this policy, this was not an MASC and I added this one in. So it's a mix, not all of them are MASC. Like if you see this one doesn't have MASC as a reference down at the bottom. And for the ones that were entirely our policies, I basically accepted them and then I made edits to them. This is just basically talking about the fiscal year and what the budget is, our budget development process, who's responsible for what, when we vote to adopt it. The next one, some of these are very technical. I think like this one, I don't think we even had before, budget transfer authority. And it's actually very interesting. I just want to call this one out. That for example, this talks about transfers between cost centers have to go to the school committee for approval. And I don't know if that's something that's in the MASC sort of official policy. And
So-
it's interesting to me because I don't think currently staff, am I correct, Sam? You don't like, you're transferring across cost centers and we don't approve that. So some
Well,
of this,
let me be clear. And when the quarterly reports, you should vote to approve those. And when you do, the budget transfers are embedded in there. So,
but we don't
that's
see your
not
budget. You haven't outlined them for us. So how would we know what you've
they're
transferred?
in summary, no. But again, I certainly can attach in detail what they are. But cost transfers, the committee does not approve. Expense transfers, but budget transfers, you would. And I guess my history or my experience is it's in the summary, and committee, that's been enough. They didn't want to go any deeper, but I certainly can give you the backup.
Well, I think
of
that
what those transfers are, what the amounts are, what cost centers, and what the rationale was.
the only reason I bring this up, and then I'll call on you, Helen, is I think it's very important that everybody, not just Sam, but everybody reads these documents, because these are going to be our policy for what we see, when, what we approve, and what staff can do. This is really important in sort of level setting the type of transparency that we and authority that we as school committee members want to have over the budget. And so I just want everyone to understand that sometimes I know my eyes sometimes glaze over on some of this, but there's really important authority and delegation procedures that are articulated here that everyone should be reading. Go ahead, Helen.
So I do remember a number of years back, this was when Peter Rowe was still here, we had set up different an A through G, what are they called? Different areas.
The cost
within
categories,
those-
you mean?
Huh?
Expense categories?
Expense categories, right. That within those areas, you could transfer up to 5,000. After that, you would have within. If it was transferred between those areas, so if it was from personnel to supplies, then I think but there was a, I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty speaking today, but there was a policy about this. It must be somewhere in there.
It could be, and again, this is cleaner language, and the committee might want to say, well, we want to do something like what you're saying. Is it $5,000? I don't know if that was written in the policy at 5,000, but again, just the level of, is it above 5,000? We want to know what happens if Sam breaks it into two separate charges that are, $2,500.
If he's messing with
Not
it.
that he's trying to
Okay.
avoid it, but just that like what constitutes a charge, right? So I think that there's just sort of things that we all want to talk about, because again, this defines the relationship of the level of scrutiny on the budget
Yeah.
and so forth and
I
process.
mean, maybe
and
we don't want to do it anymore, but
maybe we don't. We should talk about it though.
Yeah.
And we
Well,
will
yeah.
talk about it.
I mean, and I'm sorry, Andy's hand is up, but I would just want to say, while it's fresh, generally 5,000, everything's on a budget this large, that's not, it's the threshold's going to get blown all the time. I think what I'm reading here, what would have to happen is this would have to be approvals after the fact, because if not, then we're the accounting system's brought to its knees until the committee. So my experience is you do it, you disclose it, you talk about it as part of the quarterly report, and then the committee approves it, unless there's something, and we can always walk it back, I suppose. But unless you have a threshold, given the size of this budget of at least, I don't know, 25,000, then I think the issue is maybe anything under 5,000, you don't have to detail. It's all these transfers that are aggregated that each are under 5,000 add up to this. And here are the ones that are uniquely over. And here's the total for the quarter. Might be an approach.
Well, I think that at the end of the day, what we're going to want is for you, Sam, to go through this and to provide some of these recommendations of
That's
how
fine.
you would approach for us to then decide. Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, so what are the cost centers referred to here? And are those actually the categories that sort of the school committee actually would want to be looking at, or do they cut across the categories that we ought to be most interested in?
Well, and this is the exact question of, every year we basically have a line item for personnel.
Yeah, like that's
And is
not
that-
useful, that's not
right.
by itself
So-
a useful category.
And
Right.
again, as we think about, and I'll show, it's somewhere in here, I don't think I've gotten it to it yet, the reporting, we might want to have that we articulate our reporting categories. And then again, this is the transfers between reporting categories. So again, I'm asking everyone to take a sort of systems perspective when they read through this, because this is going to define how we engage with the Office of Administration and Finance and how we engage on the budget development process. I'm just going to keep
Just
going. Oh,
One
go ahead.
suggestion, Mike D'Onofrio would remember how we used to do it, just to look at it so that we know what we may want or not want to do.
I'll reach out to him.
Yeah, I think he would be a good source.
So this is again a sort of, there's generic MASC policies in here. I don't particularly, some of them I assumed that there was a really good reason why MASC wanted them in there, but I don't necessarily know why they were in there. So we can talk about whether or not we end up wanting to include them. This is about authorized signatures and who gets to sign for what. This is about just sort of legal liability and who's covered for if they sign stuff. This is the accounting and reporting. So this was that other question about quarterly financial summary. Now it's interesting, they actually, this language differentiates cost center and budget category. So we would probably want to clarify that, but thinking again, Andy, to your point about having our reporting be aligned with what we're asking for. So that would need to be tied up. This is about the audit process, the purchasing rules, who can purchase, the procurement process, payment process, who can get expense reimbursements and what the rules are. And then I put in a whole list here of some other related policies. I went through the entire hundreds of pages of the policy manual, because finance stuff gets hidden all over the place.
You're right.
And I wanted to tag some of them as things that we might not want to necessarily revisit in our, we need section D, the finance section, to be updated, but then there's some other stuff here that we probably want to revisit. And I wanted to tag these things as for us to go back and revisit after the fact, such as the things that we've talked about student financial assistance and fees, fines, and charges. That's one. Community use of active school buildings, which is what we were just talking about relating to base and extended day. Meal charges, which was about, we talked about that earlier, relation to the fees and fines and who pays for lunch and reduced fees for lunch, and so forth. So they're listed here, and at minimum, we might want to just have this list maintained so that when people are looking for everything in section D relating to finance, there's at least a cross-reference as well. So that's the document. You all received a clean copy of it, again, so you didn't have to look at all the mess. But I think, David, we're gonna schedule a joint meeting of finance and policy to go through this in more detail in June. And I just wanted finance to get a preview.
Yes,
of-
I think,
I couldn't hear you.
yes, thank you for doing that. I do think it's important that we have a joint meeting so that the policy subcommittee could move this toward the full committee. This has been something we've been actively trying to work on, and I'm happy to move it along.
Great. So we'll probably try and schedule something for June. And I know that, again, there's a lot of content in there, but it's been 40 years and we just need to move ahead. Helen, go ahead. And then I want to be conscious of
Yeah.
time and hopefully trying to wrap up in 5 minutes or
The
so.
final document or the clean document, did you send to everybody or just the finance subcommittee?
I replied all in Robin's email yesterday.
Because I think I didn't get it, but that's okay. I'll get it.
Yes, you got it whenever Monday was, 2 days ago, late at night, at 9:40 at night. It was an I replied all and said, here's the attachment for item 6.
You mind actually sending out the dirty copy as well?
I can send out the dirty copy as
Okay.
well. Yeah.
Thanks.
Just like the dirty copy, as I mentioned, some of it's because some of it's our whole policy where I made edits and some of it's MASC's policy where I added old policy in. So it's kind of a hodgepodge.
And it sounds like you didn't remove anything from the MASC.
I did.
Policy.
There were
Oh, you
there
did?
were there were
Okay.
policies that I did remove or I renamed because I thought in our context it might have made sense in a slightly different format. I don't think there's anything holy about MASC. If we see things that we should be adapting locally, we do. I'm also happy to send out like the link to the MASC sort of blank, like their sort of generic draft, so people can see that too. It's a huge amount of content to like assimilate and absorb, so I apologize because it's the old section D, blank MASC, and dirty and clean proposed draft. Which even when I did it, I still had things that I had questions on and made comments as much like, do we want to do this and that kind of thing. David, go ahead.
Sorry, my connection hasn't been the greatest. I wanted to add that in making some of these edits, we did attempt to incorporate recommendations by BFAC. So we are very mindful about incorporating their suggestions and their principles.
David, you're saying that's already in the current draft?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments that people want to make about anything else in the finance orbit? Nancy, are you unmuting?
Other
for
than,
anything
oh
else?
my God, Mariah, seriously? Oh my cow, this is a Herculean task. I'm amazed. Other than to say thank you, no comment. Wow, no comment.
Anyone else? Okay, so I just want to say thank you to everyone for racing through all this content so quickly. And Andy, I will send out those reference documents separately later on tonight so that people can look at those. And David, I'm going to seek guidance from you on how we even like procedurally process 17 different policies that are interwoven at the same time in any sort of reasonable time frame. Not necessarily now, but like that's a big deal.
Well, just a quick answer is sometimes we can do it in a consent agenda style, like we would do at a full school committee meeting. So we did that once before when we were changing the name of headmaster, for instance, to head of school.
I'm not sure that that'll work in this case because it's too much detail, but we can talk about it more. Anyway, I will send those out. I want to say thanks to everyone and we'll talk more soon. Okay.
And good luck tonight.
Yeah. Good luck to
I hope
Linus,
you
our
get through
presenter.
it quickly.
It's town meeting. We won't. Thanks,
Well, they
everybody.
just-